Good morning and welcome to the third of our fabulous Friday Festival interaction sessions. I'm terribly sorry for the delay, but we're now streaming beautifully. If you've previously joined us, and if you haven't, you can see the edits of the other sessions on the website. You'll know that we featured Robert Richards of Glastonbury, who's the commercial director there, talking about the wonder that is Glastonbury. We met last week with Rory Betts, who's now the CEO of Mama Group, and he talked to us principally about wilderness and glove box, and also his new festival Somersault in the West Country, which is really exciting and interesting. And I think it's probably fair to say that all of those festivals, entertainment is perhaps rather more of a priority than, entertainment overall is rather more of a priority than the acts themselves. So today we thought we'd actually come to talk about a couple of smaller festivals where actually the headlines perhaps make more of a difference. And we're talking about some emerging talents, and we really like to link this with emerging brands and emerging talent. So I'd like to introduce the members of our panel. Here we have Simon Maltas and Alex, and who between them are responsible for quite a few small to medium-sized festivals, but where I think it's probably fair to say the actual bands themselves and the emerging talent that you found really make the difference to those festivals. Can I ask you to tell us a little bit about how you got started in the industry? Alex, I understand you were at Lloyds Bank at one point, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Exactly, yeah. No, so from university I went and worked for Lloyds for about 4 years and then jacked it in and went into the festival industry.
And your festivals are?
So we're responsible for Why Not Festival in Derbyshire, Heavy Fest, which we're bringing back this year down in Port Lymph. We've got Truck Festival in Oxford. We've got Brownstock Festival in Essex, and we're also shareholders in Tramlines, which is a city centre one in Sheffield.
That's a big portfolio.
Yeah.
And Simon, what about you? How did you get started, and what are your festival portfolio?
Yeah, so we started in 2006. Our first festival, 2000 Trees, started 2007. Mm-hmm. There were 6 of us, and we were just sat around at one of the big festivals and decided we can do this. So the next July we launched, so that's been going, it'll be our 8th year this year. Last year we launched our second festival, ArcTanGent, which is down Bristol Way, again,
right.
5,000. So 7 or 8 years of experience.
That's a really big portfolio you have between you. Do each of the festivals take an equal amount of time, or do you have to devote more time to the bigger ones, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think the bigger ones probably do take up more time than the smaller ones, but they've all still got the same requirements, like the same infrastructure, scaled obviously differently, but you've still got to have a main stage for all of them, and so you do have to put quite a lot of time into even the small ones, because you're effectively building a small town.
Exactly, yeah. We'll come on to talk about some of the talent that you've got, some really exciting news, but let me introduce the rest of the panel. Paul Stook, who's our event director, a new member of the panel, Tori Just, who's our activation manager, and Ben Ingram, who's my colleague, who's going to be asking your brands questions of the panel here today. So this is your opportunity to ask these guys everything you need to know about putting your brands into their festival environment. Let me come back just to talk about the talent a little bit. I mean, I made the comment earlier on that Glastonbury, Lovebox and Wilderness are not just about the talent, although if you're listening, Robert Richards, I really would like Prince on the Pyramid stage this year if we can organise that. But how do you go about finding great new talent, and how do you capture some big new talent? I know that you've got Dizzy at Why Not this year, which is extraordinary. How did that happen? Well,
luckily we do have a very good artist booker. Hopefully he's not watching, because he'll try and increase his fee, exactly. But no, he's ear to the ground with sort of new music and upcoming stuff. So he's our go-to guy for music, for the music bookings, and he's got a great talent at not only sort of booking the large acts for the headline slots, but he's also good at looking at the up and coming guys and basically trying to get them before.
Where does he find those
festivals
guys?
I think he just listens to a lot of music. He listens to a lot, and he's got a good network of people that do similar jobs to him as well, that book for other small and medium festivals across the country. So they confer. I mean, we're very, very close with other festivals that are on the same weekend as us. In fact, Stand and Call In have an office. We're next door to each other. So we do talk a lot, especially with bands, because you can try and get the routing. So we've got Kendall Calling, Stand and Call In, and Why Not are all on the same weekend. So we can try to look at getting a band. We can give them 3 dates in a row.
And that makes a difference, obviously.
Financially, it makes it viable sometimes.
Yeah. Simon, what about your approach to the talent? How do you find fresh new talent?
Well, again, one of our directors is actually the guy who books the bands for both 2000 Trees and ArcTanGent, and he has basically just been a music fan all his life. I mean, you should see his office. It's literally thousands of CDs. And he's a massive music fan. We've been going to festivals since we were like teenagers.
Yeah.
And so he's really, well, like Ian at Why Not, he's got his ear to the ground. And I think it's, for the smaller festivals, it's about picking the new bands that you think are going to make it big.
Yeah.
So, a few years ago we had Mumford & Sons.
Fantastic.
Which they cancelled just before because they got massive
They cancelled you?
Yeah. So,
wow.
But yeah, it's picking the bands that you know are on the way up.
Yeah. I mean, with Mumford, did you all have an eerie feeling that they were going to? Could you see it? Could you see
I
they
mean,
were grow?
we were in a bar in Cheltenham watching them
Yeah.
about 2 months beforehand,
Yeah.
and it was incredible. There's about 50 people there,
Yeah.
and you could just tell straight away these guys are going to be massive.
Fantastic.
So yeah, that was a nearly.
That's great way to go. And just turning now to Paul, I mean, we've called this session Brands and Bands. I mean, how do the choice of talent, how does the choice of bands have an impact on brands, if any? Is it something that our brand owners watching should be cognizant of?
I think in this particular instance it would do, as we touched on some of the other sort of broader spectrum festivals where they have slightly more diverse festivals. I think with these two gentlemen here, I think we can see there's an underlying trend of bringing emergent talent, and I think they're sort of more specific genres of music. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there seem to be more, specific genres of music. So I think brands should really look at where their brand is, look at their positioning. I know it's a running theme about these discussions. Research, you must research, and this goes on something else we touched on last week about us as an agency getting the information from these guys to feed into you, say, okay, my brand is X, it will definitely fit this age demographic. We think our core audience is like this particular genre of music. I suppose there has to be a regional focus as well. And actually, I was just going to ask you, Simon, about how involved do you get on putting in 2002? Why did you choose Cheltenham? And ArcTanGent, why did you choose, down in Bristol?
I mean, I guess at the time there was quite a few less festivals around, so we were just picking places in the country where they didn't really have a decent music festival. And Bristol, for the second one, we picked because Bristol has got such an amazing music scene in itself. There's lots of little...
and student heavy, it's just...
Yeah, and people were crying out for it, but there wasn't really a camping outdoor festival near Bristol, so we thought, prime location.
So amazing that you can still find it.
Apart from Glastonbury.
Time
The other festival in Somerset.
But it's amazing that you can find these little niches and in an avenue still involved in this little weird and wonderful festival business. There are still opportunities out there, aren't there? You guys are obviously very keen. Can I just ask your talent bookers, do they go off to South by Southwest now? Are they looking for you for budget for South by Southwest?
Well, James has been for the last 2 years. I'm trying to get a ticket for...
I'm coming with you.
Well, actually, that brings me on to quite an interesting point, because obviously you are competing with the big promoters, some of whom we've had on the surface here in previous weeks. How do you compete for the audience now? So you're competing for the bands. How do you compete for the audience, and how does that have an impact potentially on the brands that come to you?
Yeah, well, I think both of us probably the key thing for a lot of our festivals is that we strive to give value for money. So our ticket prices are always kept, very, very affordable to the customer. I think that's the key thing that separates us from one of the majors, is that we're half the price. And also not half the size, but when you get on site, it's a lot more manageable. So definitely having a smaller event, leads itself to some people that have done the big ones and had to walk an hour to their car. So obviously there's positives and negatives for both. But our USP, I guess, is our pricing structure and the size of the event.
And what about, we talked earlier about festival moments. Do you set out to create festival moments in the same way that some of the more creative, larger festivals do?
In terms of?
In terms of memorable moments. So I think Robert Rich from Glastonbury said, really Glastonbury is all about creating memorable moments for that 150,000 pound people. Do you set out to make those memorable moments, or do you allow the bands to do that?
I think the bands, if it was me, from a customer attending it, as Simon touched on earlier, going to see Mumford & Sons, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything better than coming out of a festival with your mates and getting straight on your social media on Monday morning, I saw so-and-so, watch out for them. It's having that 6 months later, I told you so.
I disagree with that in a way though. I think for me going to festivals last year as well, I felt sometimes the experience is more than just the bands. I went, Wilderness Festival, for example. The banquet, I think it was an experience that I remembered as well as the bands and as well as the music. So
I mean, I think we've both done sort of secret areas, and you try and incorporate some spontaneity into festivals. I mean, last year at 2000 Trees, we ran a competition with Frank Turner through Rock Sound. Yeah. And basically gave the opportunity for people to win the opportunity for Frank to come and play at your tent. Fantastic. So he was basically no one else really on the site really knew it. And then he just turned up at this girl's tent so at 10 a.m. in the morning and played 3 songs in her tent.
Wonderful,
and,
but again, it's very much linked to the music. I think we talked about Wilderness last week and said actually there are lots of pop-up experiences that are not related to music, but yours possibly stay more within the music genre itself, perhaps.
Yeah. And you do want, when you spend a lot of money on a band, you do want them to promote your brand. Yeah. And when they come to the event, you want them to try and maybe do something a little bit different to what they, it's not just another gig. Yeah. So a great example for us was the Darkness last year. They did they're a great show band as it is. They had a great moment where the screen, they had a logo on the screen and they started interacting with the crowd about this logo. And if you go on Why Not social media now and say Darkness, everyone will just say logo, and it's just this little thing that started.
Which is unique to you. It's fantastic.
So if you YouTube Darkness, Why Not logo, then you'll get videos of the lead singer sort of conversing with the crowd about this logo on the screen. So you do trying, or you want, I guess, is that the artists are inputting something unique into your event.
I think the other good thing about small festivals is quite often the bands will hang out for the whole weekend. Yeah. And so instead of they're hidden behind a big backstage area, they're walking around and buying drinks at the bar, and so you can actually chat to them. And at ArcTanGent this year we had we selected about 3 or 4 bands to actually do DJing for the silent disco. And that was massive.
That's a nice idea.
That was massive. So you get a little bit more of a personal connection, I think.
Yeah. Okay, I want to congratulate you both because you both have award-winning festivals in your portfolios. Does having won a festival award influence the way you feel about your festivals, and does it influence the brands who come and talk to you?
Yeah, massively. Yeah. I mean, the fact that the UK Festival Awards is fan voted is just an extra validation that you're doing a good job. It's massive. We've won Grassroots Awards twice, I think now. I think Why Not has as well.
And Best Toilets.
I was going to come to Best Toilets. I mean, that is obviously the award. That's the coveted, isn't it? That's the Golden Globe.
That was it.
We got that this year, actually.
They beat us 2-0 this year.
But it does. And does that make a difference to the approaches you get from either bands or brands?
Yeah, I mean, it's all great publicity, and obviously there are a lot of festivals out there, but obviously if you can raise up your head above and say, we've won these awards, of course it's all great.
It must be a standout from potential emerging brands we mentioned at the outset. If they are considering, I've got a pretty small pot of money here, I'd really like to get involved in festivals. They just go onto the websites and all of a sudden they see 2,000 Trees as award winners. I think that discounts 2/3 of everything else that's on this particular list, and maybe festivals and regional aspects that look into. So, testament to you guys, what a great job you've done, and I hope you get so much success and hopefully business from it as well. I really do. You deserve it.
I mean, Paul just touched on emerging brands. Do you have any emerging brands who've been approaching you? We know, for example, that I think Jimmy's Iced Coffee has been Jimmy of Jimmy's Iced Coffee has been following our broadcast. Welcome, Jimmy. But do you some of those emerging brands that are now becoming quite mainstream? Do they come to you and say, "What can I do with you?" rather than with some of the larger, more major promoters?
Not as much as we would welcome.
Right.
Definitely. I mean, both of our festivals have grown from, Why Not was 200 people in a quarry where, the diesel run out of, so the music all cut off an hour before it was meant to because we didn't top it up with diesel. So, we've been there as a entry level business, and we've grown it up very, very organically. We've never invested money into Why Not. It's grown as the demand for it has grown, exactly the same as these guys. So we've been there, and we'll definitely be very welcoming to any sort of emerging brand because we've done it and we've been there, and we're not just out for the money.
So you understand them as well.
Yeah, we understand them for one, and the other thing is is it's a reciprocal benefit, because if they grow, then, you know, and they come back, then they would have more, you know, if we can help them grow, then they're going to remember that and come back, and everyone wins.
I think it is increasing, because people are now realising that actually, you know, it's not just about putting adverts out or, you know, having a presence on site. Festivals are such an amazing opportunity to actually get interactions with your brand. So it's not just putting a poster up. And so I think they realise that it's a big market. It's a big thing that a lot of the UK population go to every summer. And it, you know, it's perfect.
Yeah, and it occupies a special position in the hearts of those consumers.
And everyone's having a great time, and they're in a positive frame of mind.
The halo effect of the brand can be enormous.
Exactly.
It's like, where else can you capture those people who are in an excellent mindset, free from work, free from every other stressful element of their lives, and are there best part of 24 hours for 3 or 4 days.
And the way they appraise your brand as a brand owner is going to be completely different than the way they look at it in Waitrose or Sainsbury's, although it's fabulous, Mrs. Waitrose and Sainsbury's. But
and also at a festival, because you're not, you know, it's not a TV advert or it's not walking down the supermarket aisles. You're actually, you stand out because you're one of only a few brands that are
So
present.
actually, that's a great opportunity for emerging brands within your festivals. They can be much bigger. They can have a much bigger footprint in terms of that.
And although they'll speak or they'll get exposure to less people, the exposure they do get will be a lot more focused. I think they'll get a better return on focusing their sort of efforts towards one demographic, or you know, the ArcTanGent demographic is very different to the Why Not, but if your brand fits the ArcTanGent demographic, then you've got 3,000-4,000 people, very captive, and you're not competing against the big brands that are giving free beer away, for example. You know, you can really focus in on that exact target market.
We've talked in the last couple of sessions about how you make that relationship work within festivals, and I think we've concluded it's probably not just about, for example, sampling, although sampling can have a great position for you, but actually you need to overlay another experiential level to your sampling activation in order to make the most of it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone likes a freebie. Everyone likes a little goodie bag with, you know, whatever product it happens to be. But you know, that gets lost if you can offer something, you know, and there's no boundaries really. You can be as creative as you want to be, but you're going to get a lot more interaction. You're going to get a lot of people buying into your brand, and that's obviously what you want as a marketing.
And it's what we want, because we want the customer to have more things going on, a good experience, and more fun and interactive things to do on site.
Exactly.
So everyone wins, I think.
Can I just chuck a question at you two, really? I'm just thinking from whoever is out there looking at some viewing in, being custodians of their brands. Is there, because I'm sure they must be thinking festivals, they all think big money, big activation costs, big staffing costs, big this cost. Is there any kind of entry level that you would take a phone call from yourself and say, Simon, Alex, you know, we've had a call from X, they've got a few hundred, a few thousand or whatever. Is there you would consider taking anything within reason, obviously, if it worked for you guys? If it was one man selling something out of a, you know, jazzed up wheelbarrow for a couple of hundred quid, or is there something to say, right, I've got £10,000 to spend here, you know, I'd like to do this, and maybe get more involved in sort of some routes of sponsorship or associate sponsor. I know it comes a lot more money, but I can see brands out there thinking, these are festival organisers, I'd love to get involved with Simon, I'd love to get involved with Alex, but it's going to cost me £50,000. It isn't, is it?
No, not at all. And I think the whole point is everything's scalable. And you know, if it's a brand that fits, then we will be happy to get them on board. We try and do sort of a bronze, silver, gold sort of package, but they're just sort of frameworks. It's like, for this, you get this. But if you want to go for the top package, you might be able to get naming rights for a stage, for instance. But everything in between. And I think the best thing is just to start that dialogue. And then,
And that's the beauty of us being small businesses, is that we have that flexibility that they do. So, you know, if Glastonbury might not have the flexibility, or Reading and Leeds might not have that flexibility, that they can, you know, let someone in for a reduced rate in year one, you know, to get it going. Whereas, you know, we can obviously.
And with the small guys as well, smaller festivals, you're talking to the decision makers. You're not having to run.
Absolutely, there's no committee.
And if you sell the benefits of your brand and why it will be interesting to the festival goers, then you know the job's done.
And I think if the brand can bring a relationship and bring a level of experiential layering onto it, then all so much the better. So I want to turn to Tori now, because I know you're responsible for a lot of the team that we have on site, literally grassroots.
Yeah.
The brand ambassadors can really impact on the way the promoter feels about the brand, as well as how the festival goer feels about the brand. What's your take on that?
Of course, yeah. So as you call them brand ambassadors, I think some people see them as just promotional staff, and they'll just get any old person to go and work in the festival environment. And I think really it's really important actually to have the promotional staff or the brand ambassadors to embody the brand, and it's about getting the right people, the right fit. As you mentioned earlier, the demographics are really important. So it's actually getting the right demographic of promotional staff or brand ambassador or advocate to work for that particular brand. So I think that's really, really important. And in my experience, it's about hand-picking the right person for that particular brand as well. So.
It's a certain person that can work in some of these, which are quite hot-tail environments, let's be honest.
And challenging environments.
2 o'clock in the morning, they can be somewhat challenging, and it needs slightly stronger personality. I remember we were working for one client, and they were adamant that their sales force were going to do all, they would do everything. And we said, you sure about this? No, we'll have sales. Obviously, I suppose it cut their costs. And these 2 guys turned up. I'm not giving their age away, I've got to be careful with age here. But they had short sleeve white shirts and ties. I thought, oh my God, you're not, I couldn't believe it. And it just killed everything.
No, don't send the accountants.
Absolutely.
No, don't send
I wish I could name those, but I'm not going to.
At the end of the day,
are you mad? Have you not not listened to anything? Anyway.
The people interaction is really, really important. The person who interacts with that brand, the first thing they see is that person who's going to pass them a sample or something. And if someone gives off a bad impression, they're going to go away with a bad impression of that brand. And I think it's important to really train the right people and get the right.
And going back to the smaller brands, I would hope, for example, Jimmy's iced coffees, it would be Jimmy. Selling his own.
Got that, Jimmy?
But there's no one, there's no one better to sell a brand than the person that created
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's perhaps give Jimmy an opportunity to respond. Ben, have we got any questions coming in?
Yeah, we're going to start with one from our friend April. And I must congratulate you, April, because I know exactly where you're coming from with this question. And I'd actually thought about this earlier following a conversation I know we've had. It's to Alex and Simon, and it's flipping things on their heads a little bit from what we've discussed before. We've talked about the benefits a brand can have from a festival, and you, very aptly to set up this question, alluded to the benefit that your festivals can have from the brand. Do you look to brands to help grow your festivals, and are there particular demographics that you're targeting as festival owners to increase ticket sales?
So are you saying, can the brand bring people into your festival?
To the festival?
That's an interesting take.
Well, yeah, I think we've both worked with Prime Minister, haven't we? Which are obviously a big brand, but they started, when we started, they were still quite small, just with one shop in Bristol. And now they're obviously a massive, I don't know if global, but certainly national. And we're always working with people like that to try and, so they've got a massive database, which they will then try and encourage them to come. And they get the benefit of being associated with an amazing music scene, but we also get exposure to all their customer database as well. So for us, it's obviously about selling all the tickets. So any sort of help with marketing is great for us, and that's like an additional benefit.
And obviously then, so there's the reciprocal marketing side of things, which is a given, I guess. But obviously the money that's brought in, that goes to the lineup budget and that obviously,
or improving infrastructure.
Improving general. So that side of thing, that obviously goes into the pot as well.
So that leads very nicely again onto the next question. Obviously, any brands that may come and work with a festival, the ideal is they ship a load of buses down and it's full of 5,000 full-paying customers that are going to come to the festival. Outside of that, as we've said, they can bring a lot of different things to the festival. So one is a financial investment at maybe a sort of sponsorship level. But if they're coming in and we're talking more experiential, what can a brand bring? What would you like to see brands bringing to your festivals?
Interactive installations. Basically.
Okay. I mean, experiential is quite a word that's bandied around quite a lot, but it really does sum it up. It's if you can add something a little bit different. So hot tubs, for instance, is one thing. If okay, so there might not be a brand who wants to do that, but we were thinking about doing a drive-through cinema sort of thing and having like loads of old cars. And
We've already done that, so I think
I don't go to your festival.
Simon will win an award.
Exactly. We'll execute it perfectly. No, but it's adding something extra for the punters, really. And it really is. It's not just about putting your brand behind the bar or whatever.
There's two ways of doing that. There's one way is that, I mean, I for example, I know that I'm creating a pirate bar this year, for example. So one way would be for someone that, you know, a rum brand, for example, would want to sponsor the pirate bar and have it as the X, Y, or Z pirate bar. So that's one way, is that we've got set installations that a sponsor can come in or a brand come in and activate. A roller disco we've also got, you know, it could be a roller disco with a clothing brand or with another type. The other way is obviously that the brand has their own idea on how they want to activate, and they bring that to you as a proposal.
And you work together on that proposal effectively.
So I think there's two different ways that.
So that's quite interesting. Last week when we had Rory, he was talking a lot, particularly with Wilderness, about how his ideal brief is for someone to come in and just say, this is us, what can we do with you? But what you've just highlighted upon there, and maybe Paul, you could tell us a little about how as a brand we could go about this, but there's a lot of creativity happening at festivals that, as Alex has quite appropriately highlighted, a brand could fit perfectly into. But how do there's 350 plus festivals out there, each with 20 creative things. Well, beyond choosing them, how do I find them?
It's just research. Whether you are spending £200 or £200,000, no one would do anything, I don't think, without taking some time and care and researching about this. I think fits with me, and I think that's where it has to all start off. And then it is getting. I go to festivals because there are a lot. You'd be amazed how many brands wish to get to a festival and may not have even ever been to a festival. They see Glastonbury on BBC One, they see Reeling and Leeds, they see Tion. I think I'd love to be involved in 80,000 people. You have to know where you're going. You have to. It's vital. You're just wasting your time, these guys' time, if you're not doing things right.
But going back, I think that links in quite nicely to what you were saying earlier about the lineup, how the brand and the line. I think when you first start researching, I think you can get a lot from what the lineup is at the festival. So you can probably associate a brand with a lineup quite easy, and then you look at that genre of music and you see. You might take the top few and then see where they're playing, and it might give you an idea of what type of festival your brand would work well at. Because some of our festivals that we do are totally different, completely different audiences. So I wouldn't suggest, if a sponsor came in and said, we've got this great product that we think would fit the Why Not crowd, I'd be like, it might not fit them. However, I think the truck crowd is absolutely spot on.
Absolutely, because you know your audience better than anyone, but actually the bands are a good indicator of what that audience is.
It's a good starting point, I think, to find out where you would, which sort of festival you'd fit in, and start with the bands, and then you can generally get a good demographic idea through the lineup and the price of the ticket as well.
Do you track spend? People on site. I'm just saying. I'm assuming.
Alex is smiling there. Lloyd's bank experience.
Not telling anyone. But I think your festivals are, because of the the emerging talent, it's new acts, it's new bands. I think I'm right in saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but does it seem to be very much an 18 to 24 core, particularly maybe amongst your son? I think maybe with Why Not could be slightly older. I'm not quite sure. But just thinking, okay, these guys have 6 or 7 festivals, predominantly 18 to 24s. We can go from here. Are you looking to expand that age group? Are you looking to bring in more of a sort of family-friendly audiences, which I know seems to be big business at a lot of festivals now, is catering for families. So mum and dad could go off and enjoy themselves. There's something to keep the kids occupied. Are you looking at maybe bringing another layer of sort of demographic on top of what you do?
Yeah, I mean, 2000 Trees does have sort of family areas and all the rest of it, and that is, you're right, about 18 to 24. But it's not. I don't think every festival should necessarily do it. So the other festival, ArcTanGent, is slightly older crowd, but because of the lineup, it is so music focused. It's not. I don't think it's so attractive to families for that one. So each festival is completely unique.
So straight away, that sort of shows that these guys need to do a little bit of research, finding out, because God forbid if they come for you, this is not what we're expecting.
But then we, even if either of our festivals wasn't useful or relevant to them, we could switch it on to Alex. And
It's a
I think
good partnership you've got.
yeah, well, we often, we talk all the time about what do we do about this and how do you approach
Sharing business.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no conflict of interest. It's if we can help each other out.
Have you
then
ever looked
then
at
we
having
do.
a sort of a platform approach for brands in terms of, we talked about how do you compete with some of the bigger promoters who have multiple festivals. Have you ever thought about showing a kind of platform for brands, directing them one way or the other as a unified approach?
Yeah, I mean, we do all the time. I was talking to a guy yesterday, and it was just about, okay, so we're slightly smaller, obviously, but what you're getting is you're getting access to various different places. So you could actually, for the price that you're paying, you could probably get access to all the whole group of festivals, really.
Yeah, we do work very closely together, I think.
That's good. We touched on pouring rights earlier on. I mean, that's one thing that is consistent across all festivals, that there will be a pouring rights partner. Is there a way that any of the brands thinking of becoming involved in pouring rights can do that in a slightly more experiential, slightly more sticky way, perhaps just rather than just providing the beer and the shots or whatever?
Again, it's all down to people's ideas. If you're passionate about whatever, I mean, so for instance, Alex also has another business which is selling cider. Will you explain it?
On the spot.
Yeah,
It's
a cider kit.
It's a homebrew cider kit,
Yeah.
and we activated it ourselves at our own festivals last year, so
right.
we could get an idea of how it worked.
Yeah. I gather you might be going on the Dragon's Den with this, which is...
not sure, maybe, yeah. Potential.
But you had a pouring rights partner as well, or how does that work for your festival?
I mean, that was a separate, we did that completely separately to sort
Separately,
of our bar.
But my point with that was that's a separate product, so it's not just pouring lager from a tap.
Yeah.
You've actually got a separate product which they are really passionate about, which they can then talk to customers and explain, why it's so great. So you're getting this interaction with customers, and they walk away, having learned something basically.
And again, I think there's up and coming alcoholic beverages that do a lot of activation on site. I know Jeremiah Weed, I think, have done, they have, and lots of them have their own buses. I think there's a Pim's bus, there's Blossom Hills bus, and a lot of these brands have their own bus or their own vehicle that they come and serve out of and add a little bit extra or add a stage to the festival.
Or have a little chill out area or whatever it happens to be.
So but I do think there is a massive gap of these brands coming in and doing something completely different. Completely different. Which we are obviously massively open to.
Okay.
So Simon talked about one of the great parts of these activations being talking to the audience member. Now, we've said that's great if the brand owner and the brand founder can come and do that because they're going to best represent them, but we know if we're doing more than one festival or these people at the end of the day are businessmen, that might not always be the case. So we do go back to brand ambassadors. You gave us a short overview earlier of the importance of picking the right people for them, but what's the process behind that? How do we bring that to life?
So we would work with a staffing agency. So within Ignis there is a staffing agency. We have a sister company, and we actually have a database across the UK, handpick the staff within the UK, and have a very, very interactive database. In a way, it's a little bit like Facebook. So you've got a profile on someone, you can pick out their skills, so whether they are an actress, so you might want to do something quite interactive and have actors on the brand, whether they have alcohol experience of working with alcohol, etc. So we can handpick our people and use this very, very interactive database, and also pick people that are from the regions where the festivals are as well. So it's, I think that's a really, really
and do you
great
look
way.
at the festival typography when you look at the promotional brand ambassadors? Do you match them up to the festival as well?
I would say that, but I think it's more about the brand, really. I think it's, each brand's different. I think, as we mentioned earlier, the brand will probably choose the correct festival for their brand anyway. So yes, it would be about looking at the festival, but also more importantly, the brand, I think, would be the person. The thing that we'd look
So
at.
if we want a 5'10" blonde from Kent who's into homebrew cider, we can go
I'm sure you don't like that. Moving swiftly on, Ben. Do we have another festival from the floor? Another question from the floor?
So you were asked before, Alex, about tracking spend, and that's obviously important because at the end of the day, ROI is, well, 9 times out of 10 financial. But beyond just spend, are we tracking other interactions whilst people are in the festival? What is there to track?
I'm pleased you asked. I was literally going to jump in a minute ago and add this point on because we were talking about the spend. And at the minute, it's very with a site where all transactions and all interactions are cash based. It can be quite difficult to track a lot of spend on site or movement around site, especially with standard wristbands. You're going through into an arena or you're going into a tent and you don't know how many people have been in that tent or have been to that activation. Now, one thing that is definitely going to be taking over the world soon in the festival industry, I think within the next few years, is going to be RFID. And that is going to absolutely revolutionise what data you get out of the brands. So, for example, I've talked to a number of different companies and we've looked at what they've done at Coachella and other big festivals, and it hasn't really hit the UK yet on a big scale. But I think it's only a matter of time, basically. Now, once it goes to RFID wristbands, what will happen is the customer will link their wristband up to their social media before they go to the event. They'll top it up with money, and then once they arrive on site, every entrance that they go through will be RFID, will be registered. Every burger they buy, every beer they buy, every type of beer or brand of beer or anything, all of that will be tracked in real time as well. There'll also be lots of social media activation areas. So it's crazy what they're doing, but there's things like there'll be a photo booth which could be sponsored, and then you tag in and it will take a picture with the sponsor's brand on it. There's other things that they can do, even down to if you see a band that you've enjoyed, instead of having to remember what that band is after a few beers, you tag your wristband and it will email you through a list of the set list.
Like a playlist.
Very nice, that's lovely.
This is the way it's going. And then you'll know every single person. It's a bit Big Brother, so I think it needs to be gently.
I think some people would be slightly fearful of that, wouldn't they? Really,
it does need to be gently brought in, I think. But it's effectively what's going to happen, and you'll know every single person on site, their demographic, because they've linked it. Or probably will link it to Facebook or any other
Instagram.
Any social network. Others are available.
You'll know exact spend for every demographic on anything, the time of it.
But that's great for the festival itself, but obviously it'll be great for the brands.
For the brands, absolutely, absolutely.
Then you've got the data capture.
Going back to basics as well, sorry to interrupt, back to staffing again really. Actually, you can utilise staff to find out particular data for your brand as well, which would be a lot not simpler than an RFID wristband, but I suppose that's where things are going, but staffing is also a really good way to do that.
Is that afterwards when I see post 11 o'clock, I can see exactly where all that money did go.
Money went.
There are benefits. I don't want to put across this technology as just a cash cow or a data thing. There are lots of benefits for the customer.
For the
as well.
customer,
You queue less. The security is better. So tent thefts and stuff, you're less of a target because there's less cash on site. So there is a lot of customer benefits, and I'm very keen, especially with our festivals, that if we do go down this route that is absolutely driven by the customer experience.
Absolutely. I'm glad you made that point.
Rather than any sort of
because we talk a lot with our clients about RFID and when is the right time to bring it in, and I think it's got to be that your festival goers understand the benefit, because we've seen the chatter that emerged when Glastonbury required photo ID for the first time, and it's taken a few years for that to die down. So the festival goer is very keen that anything technical does not get in the way of their experience at the festival, because it's an analogue experience effectively, and digital is great, but only when it adds to the experience, not when it detracts from it.
Just quickly, Alex, have you looked at the investment cost on this? If you were thinking, right, we will try one of our festivals this year, next year, let's say, why not? Have you got any idea the expenditure of that you'd have to would you go cashless, one site completely, or surely you'd have to merge the two
There's
together,
two
continue
options.
cash, or would you just take the bold free move?
There are two options. You can go 50-50, but my personal opinion is if you go 50-50, you're not actually going to you're going to get those benefits for the customer. So I think if you do it, you go full.
Go all in.
All in.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when do you see that happening? When do you think the first festival will turn?
Well, it was
RFID?
trialled. Who's trialled it this year? Or last year? Standon, was it?
stand and call in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they-
Complete festival.
Yeah,
The
and
whole
they
festival was
had a
fabulous.
great
Right.
experience with
It
it.
did go well, and,
Really?
and as I said, luckily we were next door to it. So I actually went for lunch with
Yeah,
Alex
yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah.
We did stand and we were talking about
Yeah.
the positives and the negatives of it. Obviously, every new sort of technology that comes in, there are drawbacks of
Yeah.
it. But I think the British festival industry will, it's obviously been a bit slower than the European ones on the uptake of it, but I think it will happen.
It will happen.
I think this year you'll see it in place in quite a few festivals. I don't know where our ones yet. We might trial it at one of our smaller festivals before to get the confidence in the systems.
Yeah, yeah.
But
it's
I
a
think
huge
as long as
change.
you explain it to the customers in advance. I think from standard experience, it was 100% positive.
It was accepted.
Yeah, and you don't just surprise the customers with
No.
it. You give a bit of a pre-awareness campaign,
Yeah.
and then everyone's used to using new technology now.
Yeah.
So it's just
People
another.
love it as well. People
Yeah.
love something new.
Well, I think to throw, we throw a lot of marketing terms around, but with all technology, they can all be great and all add to the experience, but as long as we take a sort of human-centric approach to them, to make sure they work, and I think you put it beautifully in how we've got to make sure it's adding to the experience. We're coming towards the end of all these questions, but I want to go to Paul off the back of that. It's going to be great in maybe 5-10 years' time, whenever it comes, where we've got 3 to 5 years of historical data behind us, and we can see this is when spending is happening, this is the sort of volume we're getting through. But so here and now, if I'm, whether it be sampling or retail, I'm a brand owner going to a festival, how do I calculate how much stock to take? I've got a warehouse full of it.
Who asked that question? It's a very difficult one. I think, well, I suppose it depends what your brand is. If it's a sort of, immediate sort of non-perishable item, you've really got to do some serious thinking. If it's something, okay, let's take the two extremes. If it's an alcohol brand, you've got longevity of shelf life. So you would speak to myself, I would then speak to Alex or Simon, say we've got X brand is looking at pouring rights, but they'd like to have some retail. I would have thought you want some retail as well to generate some kind of revenue back on that. I'd say, so right guys, roughly what we know what your attendance is, what is the, how many percentage of that 5,000 is over 18 years of age. You must have an idea of footfall through your bars for your own financial purposes anyway. So that's quite an easy one to tie in and go in heavy, because the worst thing you can ever do is run out or whatever that's worse. So you never do that. So you can just load in, as much as you wish, and then transfer it out and sell it into other channels elsewhere. That's a nice easy one. The other side of things would need a lot more conversation between us three, particularly say Paul, if it is whatever it might be, but the shelf life is 24 hours. If you're taking sushi to a campsite festival, that's a brave move. But so I think there are horses for courses. We would always manage, and that's the beauty of being able to have these forums with these guys here. I'd like to think that we're not going to come with ridiculous size to them, and it's just talking to these guys, get some honest opinions and thoughts, and we will guide whatever brand it is down the correct channel. So I'm not sure that's answered the question or not, personally.
Well, no, I think it's brilliant. And as you say, it's those logistical sorts of conversations.
It is
about
absolutely. It is a logistical
when we get into the works, and we have to use our experience as best we can and make educated plans.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
I think we're sort of coming towards the end of our 3/4 of an hour, but I'd just like to ask the guys one last question, coming back to our bands and brands theme. Have you got any top tips for bands for the next couple of years? Who's going to be the big surprise? We talked about Mumford recently.
You've literally picked the worst two people.
Maybe we should make that call back home. No, were there any bands that you saw last year that you just thought those guys are going to make it?
I mean, there's so many. There's so in terms of making it huge and commercially successful. I don't know. That's always the tricky one to pick.
But we've seen, for example, a proliferation, so many different types, genres of music. Mumford and Folk, R&B is still going strong. Rock, keeps coming back in again in its multiple forms. Are there any genres of music then that you think are going to really emerge this?
I think electronic is very strong at the moment.
Yeah.
Really strong.
Yeah.
I mean, it was plummeting all of a sudden.
Yeah,
It's
it's
gone
good,
through
and it's global now as well. Absolutely,
It's really, really big. You look at the lineups. Park Life are such strong lineups at the minute.
Yeah.
Boomtown is probably one of the fastest growing festivals in the UK, and that's predominantly done.
I mean, there's a huge demand for EDM, as our colleagues in the States call it.
Yeah, and well, for ArcTanGent, it's about the weirder subgenres that the average man on the street hasn't really heard. So we focus on math rock, post-rock.
Can you explain what math rock is?
You really put me on the spot. So it's all without getting too technical. It's all the weird time signatures within sort of guitar-based music. So it's hard to explain, but it's a little bit like jazz. You know, when jazz goes off in weird directions, it's a little bit like that. But that's really oversimplifying it. But we've got people like Mogwai. Mogwai are a really amazing band that we're trying to get at the moment. Battles from America, but it's a big thing for us. But several of these bands will work at Wine Art or 2000 Trees, but ArcTanGent is solely focused on these weirder and wonderful subgenres.
I generally don't find. I'm the finance director, so I don't find out about these bands, so I have to pay them.
How much?
Who is the 1975? I've never heard of this band.
But you have now.
A few months later,
exactly,
I'll
you have
catch
that,
up.
and you know that they're there.
Driven
Well,
by Radio
so
1.
I think clearly it's all about math rock for anyone in our branded audience who's not aware of it. We now know what it is. I'd like to thank Simon and Alex so much for joining us. It's been terrific. Paul Torrey, sorry. Orla, who is
grown version.
Orla who has been here the last couple of sessions, is poorly today, so wish her well. And obviously Ben for asking the questions with such great aplomb. We are taking a small break next week, so we won't be here, but we'll be the week after with James Kent of Live Nation, who I think will have some really interesting festival insights for us. Thanks and have a great Friday.
Thank you.
Amazing.